I'm Nathan Cole. Today, I've prepared some of the dumbest, most preventable drunk driving disasters you'll ever hear about. From a drunk influencer covering up his own windshield at 80 miles an hour just to prove his Tesla can drive blind, to a 19-year-old hanging out of a spinning car in an empty parking lot just to look cool on Snapchat, making it the very last post he'd ever share. It was August 14, 2017 in Los Angeles, California. Just after 1 a.m., Interstate 110 narrowed through a maze of concrete barriers, temporary lane markings, and unfinished overpass sections near downtown. Orange construction lights reflected across fresh asphalt, while traffic moved unevenly between closed lanes, faded paint lines, and sudden shifts in the roadway. Dylan Mercado was a 27-year-old graphic designer from Glendale with big dreams of making it as a content creator. To his almost 5,000 followers, he was the guy who made prank videos. To his friends, he was someone a bit obsessed with the internet, constantly checking his metrics, waiting for the one viral clip or sponsorship deal that would finally launch his career. His absolute obsession was a used Tesla Model S, a car he painstakingly bought given how tight his finances were. Online, Dylan knew just enough tech jargon to sound like an expert to his followers, but he didn't actually respect what the car could and couldn't do. Yes, lane assist is fine for keeping you centered on a normal, clear highway, but it was never built to handle a completely drunk driver, which is exactly what Dylan was that night. That night, it all started at a rooftop party in downtown LA with some other small-time creators. People there said Dylan spent hours drinking tequila while bragging about a freeway stunt he was convinced would finally make him go viral. Someone actually warned him that the construction layout on the 1 to 10 had just changed, but he wasn't listening. Around 1:10 a.m., Dylan piled into the car with two friends who were filming from the back seat. The roads were pretty empty, but that construction zone was a mess of barriers, cones, and sudden temporary lane shifts near an unfinished overpass. Once the Tesla hit about 80 miles per hour, Dylan turned on the lane assist and adaptive cruise control. Then, he reached into the back and grabbed a strip of matte black vinyl wrap. His plan was just incredibly stupid. He wanted to block his own view of the road, but leave the top part of the windshield open so the Tesla's cameras could still see the lane lines. The whole time, Dylan kept bragging that the car would basically drive itself for a few seconds anyway. Later on, Highway Patrol put together exactly what happened using the car's data, traffic cameras, and the phone footage they recovered. The moment he stretched the vinyl across the lower half of the windshield, most of Dylan's direct view of the road disappeared below the camera line. At first, the Tesla stayed centered because the upper windshield cameras could still detect the lane markings ahead. The faded, confusing paint lines completely threw off the system. Instead of turning, the Tesla slowly drifted right and slammed straight into a water-filled barrier at full freeway speed. The impact completely tore the barrier open, launching the car onto an angled divider hard enough to destroy the undercarriage of the vehicle. From there, the car smashed through temporary fencing and flew right off the edge of the unfinished ramp. Construction workers below heard the horrific sound of scraping metal just before the car dropped about 25 feet, landing hard on exposed rebar and concrete. The entire front end of the Tesla folded inward, crushing Dylan into the steering wheel and dashboard as the roof caved in. Inside, both passengers in the back were thrown forward violently. One survived with spinal fractures and broken ribs. The other had been leaning between the front seats to get a better angle for the video. He hit the side window, was partially thrown from the car, and died at the scene from massive chest injuries. A worker called 911, and firefighters got there in about 8 minutes. But by the time they reached Dylan, he didn't have a pulse. The coroner later confirmed that Dylan died almost instantly from massive head trauma and crushing injuries to his chest. To put it bluntly, the impact fractured his skull, collapsed his lungs, and stopped his heart from pumping oxygen entirely. His blood alcohol level was also more than double the legal limit. When investigators searched Dylan's files later, they found multiple draft clips already labeled Tesla Blind Challenge, using the same black vinyl wrap recovered from the crash. The discovery became a major part of the wrongful death lawsuit filed by the second passenger's family, who argued the stunt had been planned long before that night, rather than being a spontaneous, drunk decision. What haunts me in this case isn't the stupidity. It's that not a single person in either car loved them enough to grab the wheel and say, absolutely not. It was December 9th, 2016, and Quezon City still felt wide awake long after midnight. Rainwater mixed with oil across the roads near Balintawak, while buses, jeepneys, and fuel trucks pushed through wet intersections beneath blurry brake lights and flickering storefront signs. The air smelled like diesel, cigarette smoke, and rain-soaked concrete. For 31-year-old Marvin Dela Cruz, nights like this were just another shift. He worked as a BPO supervisor in Ortigas and had spent years driving home through that chaotic traffic after working the graveyard shift. His coworkers said Marvin treated driving almost like a sport. He'd always brag about memorizing side streets, traffic signal timings, and shortcuts that saved him a few minutes. But the scary thing about guys like Marvin is that once they start drinking, that confidence instantly turns into pure arrogance. That Friday was the company Christmas party at a karaoke bar along Timog Avenue. Security footage later showed Marvin carrying bottles between rooms for hours while everyone took turns singing. By the time things started winding down around 2 a.m., a lot of the employees were way too drunk to drive. Since it was the holidays, Grab prices were through the roof because of traffic and road closures, so a few of them suggested just splitting a nearby hotel room instead of risking it. Marvin shut that idea down immediately. Witnesses later said he kept insisting he drove these exact streets every single night and knew the way home better than Waze or any GPS. It's frustrating because even the security guards at the gate later admitted Marvin looked pretty unsteady walking to his silver Toyota Vios. Still, 4 of his exhausted co-workers climbed into the car anyway. Everyone was just tired and wanted to get home. The roads around Balintawak were especially sketchy that night. The rain had made the pavement slick, and massive fuel tankers were constantly moving through the depot district for early morning deliveries. Traffic cameras later showed Marvin drifting all over the place between lanes as he approached the interchange near EDSA. One passenger actually completely stopped talking and just leaned against the window, probably trying not to throw up. About 10 minutes before the crash, the car went strangely quiet. Dashcam footage later recovered from the Vios showed Marvin rubbing his eyes over and over while the wipers struggled against the rain. Then, out of nowhere, Marvin laughed to himself and actually closed his eyes while the car was still moving. Nobody inside even reacted because most of them were either half asleep or totally passed out. Unfortunately, right at that exact second, a fully loaded fuel tanker was crossing legally through the intersection on a green light. Investigators later used traffic cameras and the truck's GPS to piece it all together. With Marvin's eyes shut and the car drifting left across the slick road, the Vios crossed right into the truck's path before Marvin suddenly snapped awake and jerked the wheel. The front corner of the tanker clipped the Vios hard enough to send the little car spinning sideways across the wet intersection. People nearby said they heard tires screaming before the Vios slammed passenger side first into a concrete utility pole by the service road. The car just wrapped around the pole. The passenger side collapsed instantly, and Marvin's chest was crushed against the steering column, while the front passenger took the full, devastating force of the window pillar. A warehouse security guard called 911 right away after seeing the crash. A few other drivers rushed over to help, while diesel and rainwater pooled all over the road from the truck's damaged side tank. Rescue crews got there about 11 minutes later and literally had to cut the driver's side apart just to pull Marvin out. He was still breathing when they got him free, but he lost consciousness from blood loss before they even made it to the hospital. The medical examiner later found that Marvin died from severe internal bleeding and crushing chest trauma. The impact tore the major blood vessels around his heart and lungs. The front passenger never stood a chance and died almost instantly from severe head injuries. Toxicology tests later confirmed Marvin's blood alcohol level was way past the legal limit. The aftermath caused a massive mess for the BPO company that hosted the party. Security guards testified that several employees, including Marvin, were clearly wasted before leaving the venue. The victims' families ended up filing huge civil lawsuits, arguing that management should have stepped in and stopped drunk employees from driving. It's a tragic wake-up call, and the co-workers who actually survived reportedly stopped going to office parties altogether after that. Marvin's passengers were literally counting down the seconds, but in this next story, the guests were actually cheering. It really makes you think about how easily a crowd of people can turn into a countdown to tragedy without anyone even realizing it. It was May 28, 2018, just outside a luxury hotel right off the Las Vegas Strip. The midnight air was still warm at the valet entrance, packed with wedding guests snapping photos next to parked exotic cars. You could still hear music drifting out from the reception through the open lobby doors, while the valets kept busy moving vehicles under the bright canopy lights. 31-year-old Evan Riker had made a whole name for himself just by chasing attention. He owned 2 nightlife spots near Fremont Street and spent his time filming himself around rented supercars, parties, and various social media stunts. His friends knew him as impulsive, someone completely obsessed with making his life look incredibly expensive online. His new wife, 26-year-old Sienna Vale, did freelance makeup and helped film most of his content. Even their wedding had been basically engineered for the camera. The Lamborghini Huracan he rented used rear-wheel drive and featured electronic traction systems specifically meant to keep the wheels from spinning out. Doing burnouts completely overheats the rear tires, especially if you turn traction control off. Throw alcohol and uneven pavement into the mix, and a car like that can lose stability in a heartbeat, even if it looks totally fine from the outside. The party wrapped up just after midnight. People who were there said Evan had been drinking for hours before he pulled the Lamborghini up to the valet area, right where everyone was standing around with their phones out, ready to film. Security cameras showed smoke was already coming off the back of the car from some burnouts he'd done earlier near the back entrance. The valet guys actually warned Evan that his back tires were getting way too hot and were literally falling apart. Instead of stopping, he just lined the car up by the curb while Sienna filmed a video on her phone from the passenger seat. Evan performed one more burnout directly in front of the valet stand, filling the driveway with smoke while strips of rubber scattered across the pavement. But instead of staying stationary, he suddenly let off the brake and accelerated hard down the curved hotel exit road while guests cheered behind him. Surveillance footage later showed the Lamborghini fishtailing slightly as it gained speed, with the rear tires already damaged from the repeated burnouts. Just seconds later, the weakened left rear tire catastrophically failed while the car was still accelerating. Witnesses later said they heard a loud bang before the back of the Lamborghini violently snapped sideways. Sparks sprayed from the exposed wheel rim as Evan lost control trying to correct the slide while drunk. The car spun across the valet lane, jumped the curb, and slammed rear first into a concrete divider at roughly 60 miles per hour. The impact completely crushed the rear engine compartment and tore open the fuel lines underneath. Flames spread under the cabin almost instantly as burning fuel pooled against the divider. The crash warped the frame so badly that both doors were jammed shut against the concrete. A few guests rushed toward the wreck while others backed away from the intense heat. A hotel employee called 911 at 12:18 a.m. after they couldn't get the passenger door open. Onlookers said Sienna was still moving inside, while Evan was desperately kicking at the driver's side window. A group of guys grabbed metal chairs to try and smash the glass, but the heat just got too intense, too fast. Fire crews arrived about 6 minutes later, but by then, the cabin was already swallowed by fire. The coroner later found that they both died from smoke inhalation and extreme heat exposure before the fire fully consumed the interior. The crash itself had also shattered Evan's ribs and lower spine. Toxicology reports later confirmed he was heavily intoxicated. Afterward, Sienna's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the hotel and rental company, arguing staff should have stopped Evan from driving after witnesses saw him drinking and doing burnouts near the valet area. Investigators found no mechanical defect in the Lamborghini, concluding the crash resulted from reckless driving and tire failure caused by repeated burnouts. The hotel later reached a confidential settlement with the family. Evan died right in front of an audience. But this next case is just heartbreaking because he was completely alone on a dark ramp. There's something about that kind of private, stubborn moment when no one is watching that feels like the saddest way a story could possibly end. Stories like the ones in Will keep repeating themselves unless we start talking about them. Please consider subscribing to help get these stories out there. It might just reach someone before it's too late. It was September 3, 2015, along Interstate 45 near Pasadena, Texas. Overnight construction narrowed several lanes while orange barriers reflected against damp pavement under weak freeway lights. Humid air lingered above the roadway as slow traffic moved through the dark construction zone. Exit ramps remained poorly lit, with long stretches of visibility disappearing around sharp curves. Just like most nights, 24-year-old Luis Herrera finished his food deliveries after midnight. He lived with his mom and younger brothers and sisters after his dad passed away a few years back. The people he worked with said he was a hard worker, but he was really impatient when he was driving. He was always using the shoulders, side streets, and illegal shortcuts just to shave off a few minutes during his delivery runs. That mattered way more than people realized. Backing up down a highway exit ramp at night takes away almost any chance another driver has to react, especially on a dark, curved ramp. Even a totally sober driver would barely have enough time to miss something like that. Earlier that night, Luis went to a coworker's birthday party at a sports bar near Pasadena right after his last delivery. Security cameras later showed him drinking beer and mixed drinks for a few hours. His coworkers actually offered to get him a ride home, but Luis wouldn't listen and said he knew those roads better than anyone. Around 1:40 a.m., traffic started backing up near a construction bottleneck on Interstate 45. People on the road saw Luis pull onto the shoulder to get around the traffic before cutting back toward an exit. After he accidentally missed his turn, he stopped right on the shoulder instead of just driving to the next exit to turn around. Traffic cameras later showed his reverse lights turn on before his truck started slowly backing down the dark, curved exit ramp against traffic. That single choice turned a bad mistake into something deadly. Right around that exact moment, 39-year-old Daniel Perez was exiting the highway in a Honda Pilot with his wife and 2 kids, heading back from Galveston before school started up again. Dashcam footage later showed the SUV coming around the curve at about 68 miles per hour. Because the ramp turned so sharply and didn't have any streetlights, Daniel didn't see the backing up truck until less than a second before they hit. The Honda slammed almost head-on into the rear corner of Luis's pickup truck. The impact crushed the entire front of the SUV inward, caving in the roofline and forcing the steering wheel deep into Daniel's chest. His wife, Sophia, suffered catastrophic abdominal injuries when the dashboard and engine compartment were shoved backward into the passenger side. Luis didn't have his seatbelt on right. When the truck spun, the side of his head slammed into the window frame so hard that it broke the bone right above his ear. Blood covered the driver's side glass while the truck rolled backward into the guardrail. A truck driver passing by called 911 right away, and rescue crews got there about 9 minutes later. Daniel was already gone. Sophia passed away on the way to the hospital. Their 2 kids in the back seat survived with broken bones and cuts from the broken glass. The Harris County medical examiner later found that Daniel died from the pressure on his chest, which tore his heart and lungs almost immediately. Sophia died from internal bleeding from her crushed organs and a broken pelvis. Luis passed away later from brain swelling and skull fractures after he stopped getting oxygen after the crash. Investigators later proved that Luis backed up almost 400 feet down that ramp before the crash happened. Tests showed his blood alcohol level was way over the legal limit. Investigator later said that how quiet the surviving kids were was something that stuck with him long after the crash was cleaned up. In that last story, neither of them wanted to die, and this next one is exactly the same. One guy refused to miss his exit, and in this next story, another refused to back down. And it completely floors me how little distance there is between wounded pride and a funeral. It was July 21, 2014, in a shopping plaza parking lot near College Park, Atlanta. Midnight humidity still hung over the asphalt, while most storefronts sat dark behind metal security gates. Scattered shopping carts rolled slowly across empty pavement as music echoed from parked cars near the loading area behind the closed businesses. Not far away, 19-year-old Trevor Neal spent most of the year trying to fit in with older mechanics at a used tire shop where he worked after community college classes. Co-workers described him as the type who accepted every dare because he hated looking weak. His silver Infiniti G35 was one of the few things he felt proud of. The car used rear-wheel drive and had become popular online for burnouts and drifting videos because the rear tires could easily break traction during hard acceleration. Like many burnout videos online, the stunt depended on keeping the rear tires spinning loose while the car rotated in circles. But rear-wheel drive cars can suddenly hook back onto dry pavement without warning, especially when the surface changes from dusty concrete to clean asphalt. Trevor understood basic shifting, but not enough to safely control a sliding car while drunk and hanging halfway outside the window. Earlier that night, Trevor celebrated his birthday behind the plaza with co-workers and 2 friends from school. Security cameras later showed coolers, liquor bottles, and parked cars near the loading area around 11:40 p.m. Witnesses later admitted Trevor drank heavily despite having little alcohol tolerance. By midnight, someone started recording Snapchat clips while another worker pushed shopping carts into a rough circle in the lot. At first, Trevor just drove slowly around the carts while everyone stood outside, laughing. But, of course, the group kept pushing him to take it up a notch because those first few clips looked boring. We all know how that goes. One passenger actually suggested Trevor hang halfway out the driver's side window while spinning the car, just because it would look crazier online. It's frustrating to think about, because even after Trevor struggled to shift gears twice, nobody in that crowd stepped in to stop him. Around 12:14 a.m., Trevor accelerated into another donut while leaning most of his upper body outside the window. Surveillance footage later showed the G35 spinning tightly around the shopping carts while smoke poured from the rear tires. During the third rotation, the rear tires suddenly caught traction near the storefront side of the lot. The sudden grip snapped the car sideways instead of letting it continue sliding. Trevor lost control of the wheel as most of his body was thrown outside the window. His left foot stayed trapped beneath the clutch pedal while the car continued rotating. Witnesses later told police Trevor struck the pavement shoulder first before his neck and upper chest dropped beneath the moving rear tire. The tire rolled over Trevor's throat and ribcage while the car continued toward the storefront. Security footage later showed the sedan smashing through the glass entrance of a closed clothing store seconds later. Friends initially froze before several ran from the scene believing police would blame them. A nearby restaurant employee called 911 at 12:15 a.m. after hearing the crash and seeing Trevor motionless beside the shattered glass. Paramedics arrived roughly 8 minutes later, but immediately recognized the injuries as unsurvivable. The Fulton County Medical Examiner later determined Trevor died almost instantly from crushing chest trauma and severe spinal separation in the neck. In simple terms, the weight of the car collapsed his chest and snapped the vertebrae controlling breathing and heart function. Toxicology later confirmed heavy alcohol intoxication. Investigators also recovered cell phone videos showing friends encouraging the stunt moments before the crash. Police used security footage and social media clips to reconstruct the sequence almost minute by minute. The storefront remained boarded for nearly 4 months after the crash. Trevor's mother reportedly recognized his voice in one leaked Snapchat clip before authorities formally released the case details.